Hello, welcome to Viewpoints. My name is Kathleen Kiernan, member of the faculty for the Center of Homeland Defense and Security, and today I have the privilege of interviewing Caryn Wagner, former Undersecretary of Homeland Security for Intelligence Analysis. Welcome, Caryn.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm happy to be here.
Well, thanks. It's been a decade since the Department of Homeland Security stood up. Talk to us about that evolution and how that's changed education and changed the first responder community.
Well, I think we've accomplished, and excuse me if I say we because I've retired recently, so I still feel like a member of the team. I think the department has accomplished quite a bit in the last 10 years. And one of the things that I was personally involved in and that I'm most proud of is the success that we've had in building a Homeland Security enterprise that incorporates our state, local, tribal, and territorial partners, and that basically embraces the first responder community and brings them into the enterprise to keep our nation safe and resilient. And a lot of that is based on processes for information sharing, on training, and on just better understanding each other's needs and environments. And I think a lot of progress has been made in that area. And I also think the department's made a lot of progress in coming up with creative and yet legal ways to conduct screening and activities that make sure that we are keeping bad people and bad things out of the homeland while still allowing the free flow of goods and services. And we've worked hard to do that in a way that is respectful of privacy and civil rights and civil liberties, but provides the highest level of security for the American public.
Thank you. Here at the Center, we talk a lot about collaboration. We use one of Bill Bratton's books called Collaborate or Perish. What were the largest hurdles you encountered in building that partnership across those communities of interest?
Well, there were quite a few hurdles, starting with the Homeland Security Act of 2002, which paints a very broad picture of the department's authorities. But the department was the new kid on the block amongst federal agencies, and a lot of what the department was initially expected to do overlapped significantly with existing entities that were already performing some, if not all, of those functions. So it's been a challenge to find the path forward to constructively partner with our major partners in the counterterrorism arena, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the National Counterterrorism Center. And the reason that was so important was it was hard to develop credibility with our state and local partners if the people in Washington were not speaking with one voice and looked like we weren't all on the same page. So I think a lot of good has been done in that arena. It's not that there aren't occasional still areas of disagreement or where we sort of get out of step a little bit with each other. But overall, I think we've really come a long way in defining the lanes in the road and working. And the real thing is working together, particularly to engage constructively and in a way that is helpful to our state and local partners.
Thanks. Let's talk broadly for a minute, and then I want to narrow the scope and come back to intelligence analysis. So on a broad front, you have some of the departments that folded under the new Department of Homeland Security really made sense. How about TSA? Or how about the United States Coast Guard? How about Federal Protective Service? How do those all fit into this big enterprise?
Well, I think one of the things that was going on right as I joined the department was the completion of the first quadrennial Homeland Security review. And I actually think that was a pretty good document. And I felt that the effort to sort of define key mission pillars of the department was very helpful. We understand, subsequently that we didn't capture every mission of every component because the department is incredibly diverse and the components have a bigger range of operational missions than anything I have ever experienced in my career to date, which was mostly in Department of Defense and the intelligence community. But the idea that you have the pillars, the number one of which, of course, is preventing terrorism against the homeland, but the others are focused on securing the borders, on implementing our immigration policies, on cyber security of the .gov domain, and on resiliency, response and resiliency to natural disasters. And I think if you look at binning most of what the department does in those 5 categories, it works pretty well. And you can take those things and apply them to what does that mean for infrastructure protection, which is one of our key functions in the prevent category. How do you identify vulnerabilities and try to plug them before anything happens? Federal Protective Service falls neatly into that. I think it pretty much, I've actually become a believer. It's maybe not perfect, but it was a credible response to a national tragedy, and I think there's a lot has been done, and there remains a lot of potential for synergy between the components that makes the department greater than the sum of its parts. Because most of these guys were doing what they were doing before the department came along. They do it pretty well. Mm-hmm. The question is, how do you get them to work with each other in a way that sort of raises the game in the counterterrorism arena, while they're still doing their important work of implementing immigration policy and maintaining the flow of goods at the border and all that sort of thing.
So it's really a convergence of talent.
I think so, and it's looking for creative ways to do something that we really hadn't done in a concerted way better. We've already done some of that in the arena of screening, for example, but there's more still to be done. And I think people can quibble about, well, does the Secret Service really belong, or does Coast Guard really belong? But I could make a case for all of that. Every component has a significant role to play in one of those 5 mission areas, and so we just have to figure out, or the department does. Now that I'm retired, I'll just help them in any way I can. How to enable that and get people thinking creatively about where they touch each other, and to come up with policies and procedures to make that happen.
We'll come back in a moment to creativity and innovation, but my more pressing question is, how do you attract, because you do, the best and brightest to the department? How do you leverage that talent?
That is kind of a challenge, because I think it's not a secret that there were a lot of people that weren't necessarily in favor of the formation of the department. Mm-hmm. They had some challenges attracting the kind of people they wanted early on. They still do. It's new. It hasn't had a chance to build up the kind of reputation that has people lining up to work there. And to a certain extent, it's still disadvantaged in terms of headquarters and location. It's still scattered around. We occupy a fairly old and somewhat crumbling structure in the district that not a lot of people necessarily want to work at. So what we have to do, and I think what the department has tried to do and is trying to do, is get people excited about the mission and the possibilities of doing good to protect the American public. And I think that's starting to work. There's also a lot of effort to try to attract the best and the brightest in the cyber realm, which is clearly very important. And now that the department's role has been reaffirmed by the White House in terms of being the touch point for industry and the private sector, I think the department will make some strides in that arena.
Very good. And the areas of creativity and innovation, can you give us some examples of where you see the department being particularly innovative?
I think that the department is trying to take a look now at, again, where can you combine maybe the authorities of one component with the skills, ability, and data of another to do something that neither could do by themselves. And we've already seen some success in that realm in the area of aviation screening. I think we've also seen some pretty interesting, I can't go into a lot of details, but breakthroughs in the cyber arena, because not everyone realizes how many of our components play a role in the cyber realm, but ICE and Secret Service actually have some pretty interesting stuff to bring to the table. And I think as we look at how the pieces can work together, we're seeing some real some creative ideas come out. And it's not just with the department, it's how we work better with other elements such as the Bureau on some of these cyber crime issues that then sometimes tend to have or could have intelligence benefit as well.
Let's take a walk back in history. 2004, the passage of the International Prevention of Terrorism Act. Talk about that to me a little bit. I understand, and our students do, why the act was created. As we distance ourselves from 2004 and the department continues to evolve, what are the implications for that legislation today?
Well, I think there's going to be a pretty comprehensive look at that legislation, and at also at the 9/11 Commission recommendations, which are coming up on their 10th year anniversary, probably coming up in later this year in 2014. And I think, my view, which is not necessarily shared by everybody, is that while a lot has been done, and I feel we are significantly safer than we were in 9/11, there is unfinished business from that legislation. There's unfinished business on the terrorism side. One of the things that I've been discussing recently is one of the recommendations was to consolidate congressional oversight of Homeland Security. That has not happened. Whether it needs to be completely consolidated is something we could argue, but the current structure is pretty dysfunctional. And I'm concerned that at the 10-year birthday of the department, that we need congressional oversight to be helping them take the department to the next level, not being one of the reasons why it can't get there, which I'm a little worried is the case currently. On the intelligence side, I remain concerned. The Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act was a compromise. The Congress determined that they did not want to create a domestic intelligence agency in this country. They didn't want to have an MI5, MI6 model. So they created a scenario where the FBI would do most of those functions, and they would be overseen by the Director of National Intelligence, which was created in that act, who would have a broader responsibility for national intelligence, not national foreign intelligence, but national intelligence, which in my view encompasses intelligence that is legally and in compliance with our laws conducted in the homeland. I feel that we as an intelligence community have not wrestled with what that really means, and we haven't really established meaningful D&I oversight over intelligence activities in the homeland. We haven't defined, to this day, terrorism for purposes of intelligence support, and I think there's just some work that still needs to be done, and I intend to continue to kind of push that conversation, as I think we need to get some people out of their comfort zones to figure out what are the procedures, what's the doctrine, what's the legal framework, are there changes to the law that we need that have to do with treatment of U.S. persons data. But let's get this right before we end up in a situation where we're explaining to Congress and the American public why we really didn't do any of that homework in the 10 years since the IRTPA.
Fusion centers have stood up and have received great accolades and some oversight that hasn't been, or some commentary that hasn't been as positive. They continue to evolve. They're becoming more inclusive in the community. Just interested in your perspective on the fusion centers.
The fusion centers can be somewhat of a lightning rod. I find that most of the people who are criticizing them don't understand them very well. And I spent a lot of my time at INA explaining to members of Congress and others that we don't own the fusion centers. We can't tell them what to do. What we can do is help them, provide them with best practices, with training, and help them create an environment where they can serve their own needs while being a constructive member of that larger enterprise. I think we've made a lot of progress. There are still some fusion centers that aren't that great, but there are a lot of fusion centers. Most of them are pretty good, and some of them are outstanding. And some of the actual analysis that I've seen coming out of some of the larger fusion centers is very impressive. So I feel that we have really made a lot of progress. And a lot of times the people who criticize fusion centers either looking at one specific fusion center, or they just don't like the fact that the federal government is providing money to the states, but most of that money is really not going to the fusion centers, although some of it is from the grant program, or they're just fighting the problem. And I just don't find that constructive. I think we just need to press on. I think we're on the right path. There was interagency opposition to fusion centers in Washington for a long time, naming no names. But I think that's over. So I think we just need to build on what we've accomplished so far.
Your comment about great analytical products is really high praise, knowing your background and your history of analysis. So thank you for the comment on that. I'm sure that that'll be well received by members of the fusion centers. Caryn, how about other unfinished business with the department?
Well, I guess my final thought would be that after 10 years, it's time to stop talking about whether we should have had the department, whether the department's going to survive. I think clearly the department is going to survive. Nothing really ever goes away in Washington anyway, but I do think there's a role for the department to play, and it has played it could play it better and will. I think it's time that we start thinking about and talking about the department on the same level as we do with the other departments with key roles in national homeland security, DOD, Justice, State. Basically, we're not the redheaded stepchildren anymore, and what we should be figuring out is what do we need to do to recognize the role that the department is playing and then help it get to that next level of development where it is a fully mature and operating department. So it's already come a long way. It can certainly improve, and what we need is for the interagency and particularly the Congress to help make that happen.
Very good. It comes no surprise that you were so popular with our students here, because to me you bring that unique convergence. When we spoke about convergence of talent earlier, convergence of talent analytically from a homeland defense, from a homeland security, from an intelligence community, from a strategy, and from a policy level. So I thank you very much for coming and spending time with our students.
Well, thanks. It's been very enjoyable. They're a very impressive bunch.
Indeed.
And as I mentioned to them, there are too many people in Washington who think that they have a monopoly on smarts in Washington. All they need to do is get out and go talk to some of these folks in state and local law enforcement and at the fire departments and the emergency responders, and they are an amazingly impressive bunch. So it's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.